Hey, everybody. I know it's just now turning 8 o'clock, but we can go ahead and get started, I think, and then we'll let anybody that comes in late catch up. We have two groups presenting tonight. So like I said before, hold on, I'm taking a picture. Should have said smile pretty. Like I said before, I am not going to talk a lot. If there's any questions people have, I will answer them. We'll let the people do their presentation, the two groups do their presentations, and I will add some technology pieces to that Google Doc that we've been running with, and you can just kind of catch up with them there and ask me, if you have any other questions later. Okay? So with that, our first group is going to be talking about something in advanced organizers. So if you guys would like to go ahead and get started, you're welcome to do so. This is Danielle and Michelle and Taylor, right? Yes, it's up on there now. Okay, I'm out.
Can you see it? My screen is blank. Oh, here we go. Okay. So chapter 4 was cues, questions, and advanced organizers. So just a little bit of the research and importance of this. The text said that 80% of our interactions with students are cues or questions, so something we're doing multiple times every day. And that sometimes it's to introduce a topic, activate prior knowledge, increase their content knowledge about something. And one of the big importance parts, or the parts that there was a lot of research on, were the different levels of questions. So level 1 is just kind of that basic question of naming objects, events, topics, concepts, and this helps to increase student vocabulary. The next level is organizing and classifying some of those objects, topics, events, and this helps the students be able to store and retrieve that information from their memory. And then level 3 was the higher order reasoning, so reorganizing and elaborating on that info and linking it to a new topic. And then that 4th or highest level is the abstract part, reflecting, restructuring, and advancing their perceptions about the concept. Taylor is going to talk about cues and questions.
Can you change the slide? All right. Let's see. Maybe mine is wrong. Is it still showing the first slide?
Yes, it's still showing the first slide.
Okay. Danielle, can you just click on like the next one? Is it not working?
I'm talking and I'm muted. Can you? You can only see. You guys can only are still on the first slide.
Yeah.
Oh, because my screen is on the classroom practices for cues and questions slide.
Oh.
It's on the very first one still.
Oh, so you didn't even see the second one that I was talking about.
It looks like your mouse is moving though.
I'm clicking on the arrows. My screen is changing.
Okay, so we're having an interesting time here.
Let me see if I can pull it up.
Should I stop it and start it? Should I stop sharing it and see if?
Yeah, if you stop sharing the screen and then Taylor can try and pull it up from her side.
Yeah, mine was changing slides.
Hey, weird things happen every time you work with technology. That's just something you have to.
You guys are a lot more patient than my third graders would be.
Whenever I was teaching, my juniors and seniors thought it was quite the game. That's where they were doing like tic-tac-toe, and every time I screwed up with the technology, they would give themselves some check marks.
Okay, let's see if it will load. It's going really slow for some reason.
It could just be Zoom being a little cranky tonight, or it could be the internet as a whole. I am going to send out all the slides to everyone as soon as I get into my email here and get an email made for it.
Sorry.
Is it not loading on your screen too? Do you want me to try to share
It's
my
just-
screen again?
Yeah,
It's just spinning.
it's just like continually spinning.
Okay.
Presentation. If it's not going to work from yours, the other thing I can do is I can share it from mine and let you guys control it from mine.
Okay, now it's showing the third slide.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know.
All right. Okay, let's just go with it.
All right, let's just, okay, here you go.
So the chapter gives 4 kind of practices for cues and questions are 2 of the 3 topics in this chapter. So focus on what is important, use explicit cues, ask inferential questions, and ask analytic questions. So I'll talk about each of those. So if you can go to the next one, we'll look on focus on what is important.
I clicked it. It's showing up on mine. Is it still showing the wrong slide on yours?
Yes.
Oh, just kidding.
And mine is still loading, so good thing we didn't wait.
Can you see it from this screen? If it's, or is it still showing the wrong one? If I'm not in present mode, can you see it?
On the link.
No, like what does your screen
Okay.
show right now?
Now it changed.
Yes.
Okay.
So focusing on what is important is pretty easy if you think about it. You already are probably making learning objectives for your students for each lesson. So base your questioning off of that. Use that to kind of guide the beginning of your lesson. And the chapter also talked about how a lot of teachers want to start with something crazy to really draw their students into the lesson. And sometimes that's a great idea if it's like a new science experiment or something like that. But sometimes it tends to draw teachers away from the learning objective because they just want to talk about something that's going to really wow their kids, and then their kids get really off track. So it's okay to start off with something that is going to get them interested, but make sure it's pretty explicit and narrow. So if you're talking about something like the 2 peninsulas in Michigan, instead of saying like, who has ever been on a great vacation? And they all start talking about Florida and Mexico and all these places they've been, maybe just ask right away, like, has anybody ever been to the Upper Peninsula, or anyone ever been to a place called the UP? So they're already focused on that. And then the other ones that have been elsewhere, maybe not as impulsive to share their stories. So the next one talks about using explicit cues. So cues are like prompts rather than questions for students to kind of get them started on thinking about a certain topic. And on page 53, I thought it was really important. It said sometimes the best approach is a direct one. So some examples that the book gave, was sharing the learning objective with students right away. So there's no need to keep it a secret what they're going to learn. Tell them right away what they're going to be able to do at the end of this unit or this day, and they already know where they're going. And then showing students a picture is another way to get them thinking. Rather than just asking the question, sometimes it's a little more interesting for them, a little more visually appealing. Telling students what to pay attention to as they read. So if you're giving them some sort of page or article or chapter in a book, telling them at the beginning what you want them to think about will have them more likely to be able to answer your questions at the end. And then providing a question that students will be able to answer at the end of the lesson. So kind of like a learning objective, you're showing them this question. It might be this big thing. You're saying, wow, we don't know the answer to this, but by the end of the day or by the end of this week, we're all going to be able to answer this question or meet this goal. And we'll go to the next one. Did you click over, Danielle? There it is. So the next one talks about inferential questions. Thank you. So that word comes from the word inference or infer. So asking students to make an inference is asking them to use what they know to make a connection about something or draw a conclusion. So instead of just asking a factual question that they're just going to give an answer, yeah, that might tell you that they understood what they read, but did they really understand the deeper parts of it? So I just kind of showed an example, like in a story of Cinderella. What did Cinderella lose? Where did she lose it? They might know that right away, and that means they're paying attention, which is good, but it's not really going to turn their wheels. It's not going to get them thinking. They're just going to blurt out the answer and wait for the next question. So asking a deeper question that's going to first have them think really deeply, and then they're going to give an extended response would be like asking, why was Cinderella losing her shoe important to the story? Then they're really thinking about the whole, and it takes them a while to think of their answer because they're kind of growing their brain, is what I tell their students. They're not just shooting out a fact. And then the next one we'll talk about analytic questions. So they're analyzing what they're learning. So you're asking things like, why might somebody think this or take this perspective? Or what is an argument that would support this claim? So kind of in the same example with Cinderella, a good one would be, what reasoning might someone have for arguing that Cinderella is infused with gender stereotypes? So I know that would be like more upper level grades, but even in the lower level grades, you can ask students to explain their thinking. So even if they do say something like, well, I think this character was a great character, I think this character was more evil, asking them to kind of give you evidence that they saw in the story and really just explaining their thinking. And students will start kind of piggybacking off of each other. And it turns into a really great discussion of students answering why. So this whole chapter, all these cues and all these questions are like the why questions and the how questions that we're looking at. And we'll go on to the next one, which I think is Michelle.
So the advanced organizers, there are 4 of them, but first to define it, an advanced organizer is a tool used to introduce the lesson topic and illustrate the relationship between what the students are about to learn and the information they have already learned. So there's 4 types: expository advanced organizers, narrative, skimming, and graphic advanced organizers. So the expository advanced organizer is the one that is generally used. It is the material that is presented before new information is introduced. The objectives are revealed so the students know what they're going to learn. They present students with more detailed information on what they will be learning, especially information that could be difficult for them. An example of this is I work in a simulation center, so I work with the 3rd and 4th year medical students, and before they do a simulation in our lab, in our rooms, they have to have a pre-brief. So it's just a guide on what's going to happen in the room before they go in. So they already know what to expect. They already know, the information that they're studying, like for instance, if it was a trauma situation, they've already studied that and they already know what to expect, but then they go into the room and then they actually move through the simulation. All right, next slide. So Narrative Advanced Organizer is next. It presents the information in a story format for the students. It connects personal experiences, and I like the example in the book from Mr. Silverman. He shows importance to the students for figuring out that the problem has that the problem can be applied outside of school, and he gives students an example so that they connect it and they can build meaning to provide like real world, applications. So you're just giving them the information so that they can say, hey, I can use math outside of school, and kind of a thing. So next slide. Skimming is also an advanced organizer. It is used to overlook the material. Pretty basic guide. There's 2 kinds. Tilling the text, which is where you go through and you read all the subheads and the points and, just the bold print, stuff that's important, that draws your eye. And then there's the scamper and scan, which quickly, you go through the text and you figure out what you think is the most important thing, what's gonna keep your attention. It gives the students an idea of what they're going to learn. So you can assign a chapter and you can say, hey, just skim the text, and that way we'll all know what we're talking about, on Monday or something like that. Next slide. Okay, so the last one is the graphic advanced organizers. This one is used with, it's given to the students prior to the introduction of a new lesson, but it's visually appealing for them. So it's anything with pictures or concepts. And you have to clearly communicate the expectations for the students so they know what they're working towards. So you can use many different types of tools, but in the end, they have to know what they're working towards.
All right, so using these cues, questions, and advanced organizers with today's learners, there are tons of online things you can do, or hands-on demonstrations, showing them a video clip to introduce them to a topic. Drawings, graphics, and skimming were some of them that they talked about. There are lots of, there's brainstorming software online that they can use to make some of those advanced organizers. Video clips, interactive media. One thing it did mention was just making sure that you preview them, especially if you're going to have the kids click around in them on their own, just making sure you know what the content is that's in there. So teaching tips, just kind of summarizing what we've talked about, using those explicit cues, not trying to be too abstract with the students, and helping them access their prior knowledge, whether that's through a question or a video or anything like that. The more knowledge that they have about a topic, the more interest they're going to have in it and the more engaged they're going to be in the lesson. And planning out those inferential and analytic questions that you're going to ask them, not just thinking that you'll be able to think of them on the fly and remember them, but sitting down and actually planning out what question you're going to ask and when in the sequence of the lesson that you want to ask it. And then keeping those questions that you do plan handy, so you're not just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, but you're using those questions that you planned in an intentional way. And then using a variety of graphic organizers, not always using the same one so that they get used to what to expect, but showing them lots of different ones and getting them interested and engaged in different ways. So that's what we have about Q's questions and advanced organizers. Does anyone have questions, comments? Sorry about the technology. Not sure why it won't let me present it, but. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
And I was not unmuted. Go ahead. Go ahead, Gloria. I saw you waving. You're muted. Hold on a second. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
How can I be able to apply the skimming to third graders?
Does anyone have advice for her on applying skimming to third graders? I'll let you talk, and then if you don't have ideas, I'll talk.
Well, I think I teach third grade also, like Taylor. I think with third graders, it needs to be like a short chunk of text. I don't think you're going to want them like skimming a whole textbook chapter. They're going to get lost and confused, but maybe like a short piece of informational text or something where they're looking for those headings and picking those things out in the bold words and things. So starting them with a small chunk of text and then maybe working up to a bigger piece of text.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just using those like subheadings as kind of a preview to whatever they're reading. So like asking them what they notice about the subheadings, and if there's 3 categories, having them name those and say, okay, so it looks like we're going to learn about A, B, and C. And if at the end there's something we're not clear about, we know exactly where to find that. So kind of using that as like a preview, I guess, to whatever they're going to be reading.
Okay, thank you.
Those are great hints. Does anyone else have anything to share? I was going to say, the only thing I was going to add to that is if you have papers that they can write on, that they can kind of make notes along the margins as they're reading through and they're skimming. Like we used to use the co-taught classroom that I had as 10th graders and 11th graders for chemistry. A lot of them read at a 3rd to 5th grade level, and so we would use Newsela and things like that to give them informational articles that kind of tied, events to whatever we were doing in the classroom. And the special ed teacher, is one of the things that she was really big on, was having them go through, look at the headings, look at the pictures, look at those kind of things to just get an idea what the content was before they started. And so I think that would probably work with a lot of your 3rd graders as well, to just kind of give them some way to kind of wrap their head around the material. Because if they're just reading about something that they don't have any context with, then sometimes it doesn't do any good to even have them skim it or anything like that. They're just not going to focus. Any other ideas? Comments? Nice job, ladies. All right, so we have a second presentation, and I put the links into the chat box for any of you that are following along in that. The links to both of the presentations are in there, so you have them. I also put them into the class folder for week 4, where I'll drop the video. So I don't know who has I know it's Erica and Lori. I don't know who wants to bring it up and share their screen with it, but you guys can go ahead and take over and get started.
Okay, I will attempt to share my screen. Hopefully it works.
If you can't, I can share and give you control.
Okay, can you see the
Perfect.
opening slide? Perfect.
Yep. There we go.
Okay, so Erica and I are going to talk about Chapter 5, which deals with non-linguistic representations. We have used non-linguistic representations in this class when submitting our chapter summaries, and today we're going to give you different tools and strategies you can use within your classroom. Has it gone to the second slide?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. So first I want to talk about what non-linguistic representations are. And they are the mental images we create that allow us to experience emotions, sights, sounds, taste, and tactile experiences. So basically it means paying attention to what's happening in your mind as you hear a story or read a book. In our textbook, it talks about a teacher who asked the students to pay attention to what is happening in their minds as they read the story of Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat and move to the back of the bus. And one student shared that he pictured himself actually there on the bus and sort of people watching. And another student said she felt moved by the emotion she was feeling as she pictured Rosa Parks standing up for what she believed in. When I was reading this section on non-linguistic representation, I thought of when I read Harry Potter for the first time before the movies came out, and I had to use the details given to me within the text to come up with what the scenery looked like, the setting, and the characters. And non-linguistic representations closely relate to the information processing theory, which focuses on how students process, store, and retrieve information. There are 5 main strategies presented in this chapter, and those are creating graphic organizers, making physical models and manipulatives, generating mental pictures, creating pictures, illustrations, and pictographs, and engaging in kinesthetic activity. So before we get into details about those strategies, I want to talk about why non-linguistic representations are important. Psychologists believe that information is stored in 2 ways, as words and or as images. Non-linguistic representations provide students with useful tools that merge knowledge presented in the classroom with mechanisms for understanding that knowledge. So basically, non-linguistic representations are powerful because they tap into a student's natural tendency to visualize information, and that helps them create meaning and have a better chance at recalling the information later. Research supports the idea of explicitly teaching students how to use non-linguistic representations, and the use of these strategies is a way to enhance learning and achievement, because the ultimate goal of non-linguistic representations is to allow students to process, organize, and retrieve information from memory. So the first tool we're going to talk about are graphic organizers, and I'm sure many of you have used graphic organizers in your classrooms or within your own schooling careers. And they allow students to use both words and symbols to represent and organize knowledge. Oops. There are 6 common types, which are descriptive, time sequence, cause and effect, episode, generalization or principle, and concept. And when you are first introducing one of these organizers, you need to explicitly teach students how to use them. And it's recommended that you use content that students already know or that they're familiar with, so they can focus on just getting used to or just learning how to use the tool rather than trying to learn content and the tool. It's too much. So use information the students already know when introducing a graphic organizer. This is what the different organizers look like. In the upper left-hand corner, you see a descriptive graphic organizer where you write the topic in the center oval, and then the bubbles surrounding the topic, you list facts or pictures or symbols about that topic. In the center, in the top row, we have a time sequence graphic organizers, which is pretty much a timeline. Then we have cause and effect, which shows the relationship between events. In the lower left-hand corner, this one was new to me. It was called an episode graphic organizer, where you would show the cause, the effect, the people involved, the time, place, and duration. So you could use that when looking at a specific event in history or when teaching parts of a story. In the bottom middle, we have the generalization or principle graphic organizer. Where it says generalization, you would replace it with a broad statement or topic, and then underneath, the students would go more in detail with their examples and their writing. And then finally, in the lower right-hand corner, we have a concept graphic organizer, where students would write the topic in the center and then around the topic write things such as who, what, where, when, why, and how. The next thing we'll look at is making physical models or using manipulatives. And those are concrete representations of academic content or concepts that help students create mental images of the relevant knowledge. So I have a picture of common math manipulatives you may see in an elementary classroom. You may also use manipulatives in a secondary classroom with graphing calculators. But when using manipulatives, you need to be careful that students are paying attention to the content and they're not just playing around with the manipulative in front of them, because they can get carried away when using a physical tool. And generating mental pictures. Mental pictures are the most direct way for students to create non-linguistic representations. They help students make sense of the information and store it for future use. You can help your students generate mental pictures by providing explicit details that enable students to incorporate sounds, smells, tastes, and visual details. So you might tell your students, close your eyes, picture yourself on the beach, you feel the sand between your toes, you hear the waves crashing in, you hear seagulls in the background, you feel the sun warming your skin, so they can really visualize whatever content you are teaching. And if you are trying to get them to visualize something that's more abstract, you need to model that strategy, because when it comes to visualizing something that is highly symbolic, students tend to struggle with that. So they need to be shown how to visualize something that's more abstract. And now I'm going to turn this over to Erica, who will continue sharing more strategies.
All right, I'm going to see if I can get my screen to share. Oh, hang on, sorry. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Can everybody still see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to talk about creating pictures, illustrations, and pictographs. Reading through the chapter, I kept thinking most kids are going to associate pictographs with math. They see them a lot more in math than they would think about with science or social studies or something like that. The pictographs just use symbols instead of like bar graphs or something else to represent the information. But all three of these, the pictures, the illustrations, and the pictographs, they give opportunities for students to represent their learning in their own way. That way it allows and encourages more creativity, and it's not just the teacher telling them they have to do something a certain way. It gives them a chance to express themselves and still be able to complete the task or the skill. This way is extremely beneficial when you're teaching the students new vocabulary words, especially when with pictures and illustrations. A lot of times when I'm teaching my kids vocabulary words, we will talk about what the word means, and we'll talk about using it in a sentence, and then I give the students a chance to draw a picture about that word. And a lot of times they just beg me to skip the first parts and just talk about drawing the pictures to represent the words. And also technology, there's so many different things that you can use with technology, and technology provides just extra ways to add animation and just to enhance the learning behind just pictures and illustrations and pictographs. Talking about engaging in kinesthetic activities, this is a huge one for my kids, the group that I have this year. I've learned that the more that they are moving during the lessons, the more that they are going to learn and take away from it. But mental images help include physical sensations. And when students are engaged in the physical movement, they create a mental image of that knowledge, and that helps them to remember it later on and be able to think back to it. It also increases their understanding of the concepts. And examples of this could be role-playing, acting out the vocabulary words, or playing charades and using their body to illustrate the concepts, such as hand gestures. Just today, I did an activity with my kids during social studies, and we were talking about trade. And my students, I give them each labels. One is like a Farmer Jones, and I have a grocery store worker and a hardware store worker. And like one student will start out with money, and then they will have to go with the grocery store will start out with the money, and the Farmer Jones will take his vegetables to the grocery store, and he'll have to trade his vegetables for the money. And we kind of play it out, and the students get a chance to act it out and talk about what's being traded for and what they're getting in return. Non-linguistic representations with today's learners. Everybody knows that we're quickly moving past just a text-based society. We're more based with technology and coming up with different ways to do the learning instead of just looking from a textbook. But we need to know how to effectively communicate by writing to effectively communicate through visual and the audio media. But with the non-linguistic representations, it taps into the interest and emotions of learners and audiences. And the viewpoints are better understood and more memorable for the students. Some teaching tips that the book had, just summarizing everything that Lori and I have talked about. Make sure to model the use of the strategies through demonstration and think alouds. If the students aren't being able to see what's expected of them, they're not going to fully understand it and not be able to complete the task correctly. Provide students with opportunities to practice each of the strategies with familiar information. I know Lori touched on this a little bit, and it's just important that they're not learning a new concept, such as learning a new graphic organizer and learning about something completely new at the same time. They'll be able to understand the process more if they're able to practice with something that they already know. And make sure to just keep providing students with a variety of opportunities to use the non-linguistic representations, and model how students can use more than one non-linguistic representation as they learn a new concept or vocabulary term. And last, provide students with information about and opportunities to use the graphic organizers when presented with information that isn't well organized. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I don't see any faces that look like they need to ask questions. So I really want to say that both of you groups really did a great job tonight. You summarized the information well. You used really nice graphics to illustrate your point and not just to decorate your pages. And you had a lot of good ideas and good examples that you brought to it to help illustrate what's going on. So with each of these strategies. So if there's no questions, then I'm going to say that we can call it a class. If you need to talk to me, you can end them. You can stick around after everybody leaves, and I will post some more resources for technology to help support some of these ideas in that Google Doc that I've been sharing, and I'll put that back in the class with week 4 as well. This is midterm week, so if any of you have any reflection, comment, anything like that, like I said, this is my first time teaching the class. I would love it if you have ideas to make it better in case I get it again. Not that I know I am, but in case I get it again soon. And any thoughts on things. So otherwise, you all have a great night and enjoy the rest of your week.